Let's bring in Dan Perry. He's a former regional editor for the Associated Press in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. He joins us now from Tel Aviv. Thank you for your time. Now, in a recent article you wrote, and I quote here, if it is critical, if the fighting does escalate, and especially if Israel invades southern Lebanon, Israel must go above and beyond to spare Lebanese civilians. Given what we saw yesterday, Israel's dramatic escalation into southern Lebanon, which has left over 500 people dead in a single day, including women and children, do you think Israel is doing everything it can to avoid killing ordinary civilians?
I honestly cannot say. I don't think anyone can say. We don't see a breakdown of how many of these 558 are Hezbollah fighters.
What about the children?
Really don't.
What about the 30-plus children that have been killed? They can't be Hezbollah fighters, can they?
No, I have to wonder why the children were killed. And, you know, at the end of the day, we are talking about a militant group that is embedded within a civilian population. Did Israel give them enough warning to flee? I've heard it suggested that it wasn't, but I have no doubt whatsoever, realistically, that Israel is not trying to kill civilians. I have to take exception with some of the reporting I heard on this very show about brazen Israeli decisions to fire the first shot. Objectively, as an observer, I think the Israeli perspective that they have been absorbing an attack by an Iranian-backed militant group that has taken over southern Lebanon for a year is essentially correct.
We've seen this playbook before in Gaza, where Israel sends a bunch of flyers, it sends a few text messages and tells people to leave their homes. Then they kill many children, many women, and then they say, well, sorry, Hamas, or in this case Hezbollah, was hiding behind those civilians. When is too many civilians enough?
That is a subjective question. Are the civilians that were killed in Mosul acceptable? Are the civilians that were killed in Raqqa acceptable?
We're not talking about Iraq. We're not talking about Iraq.
I don't think I am in a capacity to sit here and give a number on how many civilians are acceptable collateral damage. Every single life lost is a tragedy.
40,000 civilians in Gaza over the course of the last year.
All I can say, listen, I'm not here to justify any particular action. I'm trying to explain what, in the best of my estimation, Israel is trying to achieve. Israel feels, and I believe this is actually correct, that it's been under attack by an Iranian proxy mafia militia that has taken over southern Lebanon for a year. And I am not surprised that after a year of this, they have lost patience.
OK, Dan, I want to put to you something you yourself have written in an article. Lebanon is not Gaza, and its people, for the most part, are not aligned with Hezbollah's destructive agenda.
Yeah.
So what is happening here?
I absolutely believe, for my part, I believe that if Israel has a positive future in this region, it goes through peace with Lebanon. And if you look at public opinion in Lebanon, Hezbollah is supported really only among the Shiites. Israel should absolutely make every conceivable effort to avoid civilian casualties. There is no doubt about it. I think it would be a terrible mistake for Israel to project indifference towards the civilian casualties in Lebanon, and it should do everything it can to avoid it. Now, does that mean there are not going to be civilian casualties when this war has more or less been imposed upon the players, as far as I can tell, by Iran? Obviously, that won't happen. So we can sit here and bemoan it, or we can try to figure out how to fix the problem. And without a shadow of a doubt, the problem goes through the state of Lebanon, hapless though it may be, finding a way to enforce its sovereignty over southern Lebanon. And if it has to ask for help, it should ask for help. I doubt it would ask Israel, but Israel is currently offering it. Perhaps the state of Lebanon should appeal to the world community to come up with this force that can go into southern Lebanon and assert Lebanon's own sovereignty. Because the idea that a militia taking orders from Iran can park in southern Lebanon and bombard Israel for a year under the implausible narrative that they're overwhelmed by a passion for solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza is absurd. And no country on the planet would tolerate that. None of the countries that are condemning Israel right now would tolerate that. None, including Lebanon. There is no way this is acceptable. So the current disastrous situation with loss of life that I bemoan is an absolute function of Israel being bombarded for a year by a militia that's parked itself in southern Lebanon.
The Israeli cabinet have made it a war goal to return people back home, those people that have been displaced in the north, to return them back home.
Yeah.
Do you think they are now any closer to that goal by this escalation that we've seen?
I think that for that to be achieved, Hezbollah has to leave southern Lebanon, and Hezbollah has to probably be disarmed. And I very much fear that this won't happen without an even messier situation. Because if Hezbollah doesn't stand down and basically say we're going to stop firing on you, as we have for a year, then Israel will probably move into southern Lebanon on the ground and reestablish an occupation of southern Lebanon for a while. And that, it's tried before for 18 years in the so-called security zone in southern Lebanon. It was not a happy experience for anyone, and in the end, they pulled out. So this is history repeating itself as a farce, actually. I would hope the world community steps in, because the parties here clearly can't fix the problem in any way that will avoid further catastrophe.
If you're saying history is repeating itself, why is Israel doing the same thing it's done before? It doesn't seem to be learning anything.
I think Israel's major mistake was looking the other way for the past 15 years while Hezbollah flouted Security Council Resolution 1701 and rearrayed itself right on Israel's border, contravening the UN Security Council resolution, and established an incredible arsenal of many thousands of long-range rockets. Israel looked the other way, and now they're paying the price. And the people of Lebanon are paying the price. The entire situation with Hezbollah in Lebanon should be unacceptable to the world community. And for once, the UN Security Council was able to get it together to issue a resolution that made sense, and it needs to be enforced. My basic message is, for this to be Israel's problem, is going to lead to difficulty for everyone. Because Israel has a right-wing government right now that is highly problematic and has run out of patience. And I wouldn't want to leave it to them to fix the problem. I think this should be globalized, and the world community and the UN Security Council and NATO should make it their business to help Lebanon enforce its sovereignty. But if you're asking me to say that it's okay that Hezbollah controls southern Lebanon and has been bombarding Israel of its own volition, unprovoked, absolutely as an aggression for the past year, and you expect Israel to not respond, I cannot say that.
Okay, thank you for your time and your perspective. Dan Perry, former regional editor for the Associated Press in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. Okay, let's bring in Ibrahim Frayat. He's an associate professor of conflict resolution at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. So, Ibrahim, where do you think we are at here?
Well, thank you for this. I think Dan Perry is a very clear example of where we are at now, which represents Western complicity with the war crimes that Israel is committing today in Lebanon and for the past year in Gaza. For your entire interview with Dan, who's the Associate Press, who's supposed to be a journalist who should care about fellow journalist colleagues, Al Jazeera office that was closed in Ramallah that he ignored totally, and focusing only on justifications for the war crimes that Israel has been doing. This is the problem we are facing, that today that for Western governments and journalists like Dan Perry, that the words that history started on October 7 and ended on October 7, that no mentioning of the crimes. He's demanding the Hezbollah to stop in Lebanon, but he did not mention anything about demanding Israel to stop the genocide that it's committing in Gaza for the past year.